Oh, okay.
Yes.
I'm having problems with my microphone lately, so
Today it is much
for
better.
that's good. Uh,
Whenever you're
for
ready.
for this seminar, we would like to welcome Lori Brady for accepting the invitation to talk. She is the Senior Director of Human Resources and the Workforce Development at the Nuclear Energy Institute, and it's an HR professional with 30 years of experience. At the Nuclear Institute, Mrs. Brady is responsible for coordinating nuclear energy industry workforce programs and initiatives. She is also responsible for implementing strategies that enable the Nuclear Energy Institute to recruit and retain a high performing and motivated workforce. So, welcome, Lori, and thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure. Well, thank you all for coming and listening to me today. I appreciate it. In just one moment, I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through a slide deck. I do want to say before we start the slides that as you just heard, I really hold three roles at NEI. I oversee three portfolios. The first is that I oversee what we call industry workforce programs, meaning I work with industry on different educational issues, different workforce issues. And trying to make sure that we are prepared for our evolving industry. The second thing that I do is I actually hire people at NEI. So I'm in charge of human resources. I also oversee all of the other HR related functions. And then finally, I oversee our internal training and development. And I say that because as I share my screen, I'm going to try to do something a little bit different today. I am going to, first of all, talk about what we have going on in the industry in terms of some workforce initiatives. But then beyond that, I'm going to go ahead and put on my HR cap, and I'm going to talk about some of the things that I actually had some questions about when I attended the CRESP dinner at the Waste Management Symposium. I was surrounded by some postdocs and PhDs, and they had some questions. And so I took those questions and integrated them into my presentation today. I do want to say as we go through the presentation today, I hope that this will be a dialogue. So if you have questions as I'm going through the material, please do stop and feel free to ask me questions at any time. Of course, I'll also try to leave room at the end for any additional questions. So with that, before I get started, any questions? Okay, let's go and get started. So today, as I said, we're going to, number one, look at what's happening in the industry, how we're adapting that and making sure that we're ready and prepared for what's going on in the industry. I'm going to talk a little bit about an industry strategic workforce plan that was developed by myself and other members of the industry. I'm going to talk about some focus areas and priorities coming out of that strategic plan. Then I'm going to go and put my HR and training and development hat on and start talking about what it's like to get a job in nuclear, some of the things you might want to think about, or some of the things I've been getting questions about. And then we'll talk a little bit about a few tips that I might be able to provide, as well as talk about one of the issues from our younger workers these days is retention. So one of the things we're going to talk about is what the research is showing us in terms of where we're having issues with retention and how that might impact you all eventually. So, all right, so our workforce landscape. A couple things to be aware of. First of all, in the United States overall, we are about to experience some major shifts in our demographics. What do I mean by that? Well, much like many parts of the world, we are aging as a population. And as we are aging, we are losing people out of our existing workforce, and we have a younger generation coming up. But as we look at the numbers, the younger generation is not enough to fill the number of people who are retiring out of the environment, out of the economy, I should say, the labor market. So what that really means is that as we get into the mid-2030s or so, we're going to have less people trying to fill as many jobs as we have now, if not more, if we have an expanding economy. So that means that things are going to get very, very competitive in the United States. That means for workers, they're probably going to have a lot more choices in terms of where they want to go, where they want to work, and what they want to do. So that's happening probably around the mid 2030s or so, based on estimates. There's also something called a labor force participation rate, which is the number of people who are actually interested in being in the workforce. And so that number has historically declined. We had a little bit of an uptick in it during COVID, but that has also since kind of gone down to some degree. Okay. While we are looking at this imminent in the next decade or so shifting aging population, I think there's somebody online who has something going on in the background. We might want to mute, perhaps. I think there's a news program or something going on. There we go. While all that's going on, our existing fleet and nuclear energy is also, and this is very good news, going into subsequent license renewal. We expect that about 95% of the existing fleet will go on to be 80 years functioning, which means that we have a very solid existing industry in front of us. But let's not forget that we have new nuclear on the horizon, which the DOE liftoff report several years back indicated would result in needing about 376,000 new workers. Now, this was done several years back, those numbers. I think that we have expected that energy demand may have increased, our projections have increased, so this number might actually be lower than what the actual one may be between now and 2050. So any questions about the overall kind of landscape before I start talking about how we're addressing some of these issues? Okay. Let's go ahead and talk about the National Strategic Workforce Plan. If you want to see what a copy of that looks like, you can use the QR code on the screen. Essentially, at NEI, we have an NEI Workforce Working Group. That working group is composed of members across the industry, from utilities, suppliers, academics. We also have members of INPO, NRC, DOE, etc., the full alphabet soup. And what we did is in 2022, we sat down and we said, okay, we know that we're looking at this workforce challenge that we have through now in 2050 in nuclear energy. What are we going to do to put the basic structures in place that we need to put into place to make sure that we can be successful during that period of time as we evolve and grow? What came out of that is what we call phase one of the strategic workforce plan. In phase one, we looked at the current operating fleet and challenges that exist there. We looked at new nuclear and potential challenges there. And we also looked at certain supplemental worker positions, specifically those mostly related to outages. From the phase one report, we came up with 6 categories of items that we recognized that we needed to address. And in fact, these categories came out of 40 industry-wide recommendations. These are things that no one company or group can do on their own, and we bucketed them. The first that you'll see on the list is career awareness, meaning that we in our communities in nuclear energy have been fairly silent up until pretty recently about operating in communities. And that's because there was, for a period of time, more stigma associated with nuclear energy. And so people kind of kept quiet. The problem with that now that people are becoming much more excited about nuclear energy, is we're kind of reaping what we sowed. And most people don't know the kinds of jobs that we have in our industry, the depth and breadth of them. So now what we have to do is make people aware of all the great kinds of opportunities. Because if you ask just the general person on the street, what kind of people work in nuclear energy, what do you think their response is going to be? Anybody know? Anybody know what most people think the jobs are in nuclear energy? Okay, it's nuclear engineering. For some reason, everybody thinks that you have to be a nuclear engineer to get a job in nuclear energy. And those of us who are familiar with the industry know that that's far from the truth. A very small portion of our population overall, from an operating perspective, is actually nuclear engineers. Of course, there are more in the non-commercial sector at times than in the commercial sector. The second is pipelines. You guys are slightly younger than I am. You guys should be thankful for that. But I'm going to give you a little bit of history as to what was going on in the industry that impacted our pipeline programs. In the mid 20 teens, we hit a big retirement cliff in the commercial industry. And so we lost a big chunk of baby boomers at that time. Well, what was also going on in the industry at that time is we were decommissioning perfectly viable nuclear plants. Because the economic factors were going against us. Remember, around that time, gas started the technique of fracking. And so, because gas became so inexpensive, everybody started building gas. Nobody was really looking at building nuclear anymore. And so, what happened was we couldn't keep up with some of the pricing structures in some of the markets in the US, and we started closing some plants. So, that happened. And then, guess what happened? We had a pandemic. Well, during the pandemic, nobody was moving. People really wanted to make sure they had their job security, and people were scared to make any kind of moves. But what that meant is when we finally came out of the pandemic, guess what happened? It was pandemonium and chaos in the industry. Everybody started moving. But that wasn't unique to nuclear energy. That was across the entire labor market in the United States. It was kind of like once people knew that they were free to move from their jobs, a lot of them did at one time. Well, our pipelines weren't prepared for that because if you think about the retirement cliff, not filling some of those positions because of the decommissioning plants, people trying and the plants trying to become more economically feasible. And then the pandemic, we didn't keep up with our pipelines very well. So we were completely unprepared coming out of the pandemic to recruit as many people as we needed to. So we have a lot of things that we need to do to make sure our pipelines are in great shape as we move forward and towards 2050. Next is training and qualifications. One of the things that we are thinking about as an industry is when I was younger and I had to learn something, guess what they made me do? They made me go into a room and listen to somebody for 8 hours a day with something called a projector and transparencies. Well, I'm not going to try to tell you exactly what that is, but it's a big old machine with a light and you put this, clear thing on top of it and it projects up on the wall. That's basically what it was. And you sit there for 8 hours and that's what you did. That's how you learned. Well, we know that in today's world, people are growing up in a digital world. They don't have the patience for sitting around for 8 hours in a day looking at transparencies on a wall. So one of the things that we need to do better as an industry is we need to adapt to the learning styles of people coming into our industry and those who are already here. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we modernize our training infrastructure to make sure that we can get people in quickly, get them proficient quickly, and teach them in a way that they best can learn and learn quickly. So when we're looking at training, that's one of the things that we're looking at. The other thing that we're looking at from a qualification perspective is in nuclear, we are very safety culture focused, as we should be. But one of the things that has led to over time is sometimes overestimating qualifications for everything that we have going on. So one of the things we really want to do is take a look and make sure the qualifications that we're asking for are appropriate for the job that somebody's actually taking. Do they really need 8 years of experience when probably 3 years of experience might do, or 4, something like that? Then policy legislation. Do we have the right policies in place to help us with this transition? Employee engagement and retention. I'm going to talk about this one a lot because our numbers are higher than they were pre-pandemic. They're still not as bad as the rest of the labor market. I don't want to put panic out there, but it is higher for us in this industry than it's been before. So how do we try to engage our employees and retain them for longer? And then finally, non-traditional pipelines. How do we engage people? We're going to need so many more workers. How do we find those workers we haven't engaged yet in the industry, traditionally speaking? There's a lot of different communities and groups we really haven't been as good about engaging. So that's one of the things that we want to look at. So these are the 6 focus areas from phase 1 of the strategic plan. So let me give you some of the things that we've done as a result. For career awareness, one of the things that we did was we created a new website called Nuclear Works. And we are going to have to update this slide because we just got new numbers. In less than a year, we had over 80,000 active users visiting the website with about 320,000 clicks. And what that means is that people were coming and clicking about 4 times which is great. This is a career pathway exploration website, meaning it's not intended to be a job board. It's intended to help people go answer some questions for a quiz and find out what kinds of jobs they might be interested in and what the qualifications are for those jobs. But for those who do want to find jobs, on Nuclear Works, there is a section that says, or there's a page that says search for your next job opportunity. You click on that, you have dots all over the US map, and those dots represent employers in nuclear energy. And you can then go click on those dots and be directed to career website links to career websites for those individual companies. So lots of great work being done. The second thing related to Nuclear Works is we just launched an industry resource hub. This is for education and workforce professionals in the industry who, quite frankly, have no idea what each other is working on. Meaning, as I go out to conferences and I'm talking, usually what I find is that this group doesn't know what this group is doing, or that this initiative is underway by this group. And so the Industry Resource Hub is intended to be built into a one-stop shop so that everybody across the industry can, of course, go and see what's going on in any different workforce area at any point in time. The QR code on there takes you directly to the website if you're interested. If you want, I can take you through a website demonstration, but the main point is instead of me taking you there, we worked with the industry to do this. And if you go onto the website using the QR code, what you will see is that this is very motion activated. It moves up and down. If you scroll down the screen, you see a lot of videos that we've taken of different people in the industry doing different kinds of jobs. We have quizzes on there, and we have lots of different things that people can do to explore different types of opportunities in the industry. So let me stop there before I move on to yet another type of thing that we're doing in workforce and see if there's any questions about that. Okay. All right, our next area, pipelines. We talked about this and some of the things that we need to do. Here are some things that we have done in the last year to help us. Number one, we developed a nuclear energy academic roadmap. And the academic roadmap is to help guide us into getting all the different things that we need to have in place from an academic perspective to make sure that we can have a thriving industry through now in 2050. So basically, we invited people representing K-12, community colleges, VOTech, universities, etc., and said, what are the challenges you all have in making sure that your programs manage the way that they need to manage and can thrive between now and 2050? Got lots of feedback. This roadmap kind of identifies it and summarizes it. This was published in September of 2025, and we are now starting to implement solutions from the academic roadmap. So there'll be a lot going on over the next few years related to trying to bolster our academic institutions, our career pathways, our career awareness initiatives. All of that is contained in the Nuclear Energy Academic Roadmap. There is now something called the Energy and Natural Resources Career Cluster. Anybody know what a career cluster is? Nobody, huh? Okay. Well, a federal career cluster is simply this. It is allowing students to learn certain skills and competencies in K-12 that then allows them to build up those skills and competencies to get jobs related to the career cluster. So in the past, prior to October of 2024, energy never had its own federal career cluster, meaning that our jobs weren't specifically identified in the K-12 system. Amazing, right? In fact, our jobs were placed under things like agriculture and a bunch of different places, right? So now we do have a federal career cluster, but here's our challenge. Our challenge is making sure that this federal career cluster gets adopted into the states. And why is that? It's because the states really manage the educational systems in the states. So if we don't get this adopted and implemented, then we're not going to be able to build up that set of skills and competencies that we really want to build up to make sure that people are prepared to come into our industry. We also updated the Nuclear Uniform Curriculum Program, which is a community college program that is built on something called an ACAD from INPO. Let me just make it easy for you. It's basically a standard approach to making sure that the curriculum meets what is required through NRC and IMPO to make sure that somebody is considered qualified for a job. Okay, those are examples of things that we've done. Some other workforce priorities that we're continuing on this year. We are working on, we have been working very closely with the government on the executive orders. Who here is familiar with the executive orders that came out a little while back from President Trump, signed by President Trump? Who knows about this? Nobody? Okay.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, we've gone through those. Yeah.
You've gone through them. Great. Fantastic. Well, what I have done, I've been personally working with the DOE and the Department of Labor as well on trying to help them have the information they need to try to meet the request of the executive orders or the demands of the executive orders. I guess it just depends on how you want to look at it. Mine is the workforce. There are other executive orders, but I've been focusing on the workforce, and I've been collaborating with and doing a lot of stuff with DOL and DOE and E. We are going to later this year do our first ever National Nuclear Energy Workforce Summit. And why is that? Workforce is such a priority right now in nuclear energy. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody wants to know what's going on with it. So what we at NEI have decided to do is develop the first ever Workforce Summit. We're going to bring together people from different educational institutions, from government, from employers, industry, non-commercial groups, etc., to have conversations about how we want to move workforce forward as we move along. I'm also the program manager for CONTI, the Conference on Nuclear Training and Education. So we're going to be working that up. That is in early 2027. We are launching phase 2 of the strategic plan. So phase 2 of the strategic plan is going to focus more on supply chain, international, and some other topics relevant to this. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold.
Bless you.
One of the things that you'll notice inside of phase 2, we have developed several different numbers related to supply chain. This has been the bane of our existence at NEI because it's very difficult to talk about supply chain. But we're going to try to do the best that we can and get those numbers out this year. Another thing that we're working on is industry employee retention. We're going to be working on a white paper this year that will help our employers better understand some of the challenges. We're going to go through those in a little while, but we're going to update that information and look at that this year. We have something called regional and state consortia. One of the things that we know is that it is very hard to make inroads into workforce if you look at it from just a national perspective. Instead, growth is going to occur at a local regional level. So we need to be able to take a lot of these national policies and integrate them into local regional ecosystem and infrastructure. So we have a group called the Regional State Consortia Group, who we work with, who are focused on different areas where there's a lot of nuclear going on at the moment. We also want to expand visibility of nuclear jobs, including with those non-traditional pipelines that we talked about. So we're going to expand some work there. And you all may have heard that last week the DOE awarded almost $50 million in funding for basic safety training and workforce development initiatives that is going to be spread across 2 consortia as well as 8 academic programs. So we are partnered with those 2 consortia, so we're very excited to get those activities going. So with that, that's kind of my overview of, at a very, very high level, what's going on in workforce at the national level. So before I go in and put my HR cap on, let me see if there's questions about the national landscape in workforce and the types of activities that we're working on. Again, I want to stress, I just handpicked a few of these issues. This is not all that is going on, but it's just a representative sampling. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay. All right. So employment in the industry, what you may want to know. Maybe, maybe not. I'm going to say some stuff and you guys can tell me whether or not it's something you want to know. First of all, everybody asks me as an HR professional, what am I going to make? And they want a definitive answer. Well, the problem is that this is what I have to tell you. Different people will make different amounts of money based on, number one, what part of the country they're in, because somebody living in New York City is going to be have a different cost of living than somebody, let's say, in Oklahoma, right? Those are two very different cost of living locations. And because of that, if I were to try to give you a sense of what something you would earn in terms of a certain job, that would be very difficult. The second thing is, how many years of experience do you have? Because that does make a difference. If you are a seasoned professional with 20 years of experience, of course you bring a certain set of skills and qualifications to the job that somebody who has 2 years of experience may not yet have in their career. So when I get asked the compensation question, it's not as easy as what exactly would I earn if I got this job. It depends on where you are and what your skills and qualifications are. Okay. Second, in nuclear, depending on what kind of job you go after, you may have to be aware of fitness for duty issues. And I bring this up because we have a lot of people who live in states where certain substances are legal. However, if you are going to go and apply for a job, let's say at a utility, that does not matter. You still cannot be partaking of various substances when you want to get a job at a utility. It's basic fitness for duty. So if that is something that you aspire to in terms of having a career in nuclear energy, you do need to be aware that there are stringent fitness for duty expectations. The second thing, or the next thing I want to talk about is, and this came up during the CRESP dinner from one of the PhDs who I was talking to, and basically they were saying, but isn't AI going to take a lot of our jobs? And I want to clear this up right away, because I have talked to nearly every organization in the industry, particularly on the commercial side, and here is what all of them are saying at this point. I don't know what it's going to be in 5 years or 10 years, but at this point, they are actually desperate for people, and they have zero intention of getting rid of anybody because of some efficiencies due to AI. And in fact, what their approach is if they can get rid of some administrative duties from these people, then they can give them higher level duties that are needed for people where you need discretion and judgment to do your job. If they shut off some of those administrative duties, then they can help them grow into some of those higher level functions. So nobody is looking, that I have talked to in the entire industry, is looking to actually get rid of people. In fact, they're looking to get more people. So at this point, that might not be the case for other different industries. I can't speak for those. What I can speak for, based on my information and knowledge and all the people I talk to in the industry, and I talk to a lot, you don't have to worry about that at this point in time in our industry by any stretch of the imagination. The next thing is, I do want to point out, we looked at that 376,000 number that we were talking about before. Please keep in mind that that's a huge number. That's tripling the size of our current industry for us. So that is big. And as I said, that was before, when we thought that energy demand would be even lower than what we're now projecting. So that is a huge, huge number. And what our approach is from a strategic workforce plan perspective is, what we don't want to have happen is start building all of these new nuclear plants and everybody leave our existing fleet to go into new nuclear, or leave, let's say, our non-commercial different employers to go into other jobs. Instead, we need people who can be regulators at the NRC. We can't get our different licenses approved if we don't have people there. We need people at the DOE to be researching. If we don't have people working on different projects there, it holds up the industry in terms of moving certain things forward. We need people in the commercial industry. We need people for the entire industry. If we start trying to just take from each other, that's not going to help us. So I say all of this because there's going to be a huge demand, particularly as we get down the road for new nuclear, for workers in our industry. So please do not think that because you're hearing that in some parts of the economy that jobs are short. That's not going to be the case for nuclear over time if everything goes as we expect that it will. Okay. And then this is the thing that I hear a lot. Everybody says I need experience. Well, here's the thing. Yes and no. If you're going to try to go for a higher level position at a company, those usually require experience. But if you're going for more entry level jobs where you can grow, then what people are looking for is, have you done some kind of work? Have you worked in an internship? Have you gotten some kind of experience doing something that shows that, number one, that you have a work ethic, that you know what you're talking about, and that you can probably do this job well. If that's the case, then you don't really need that level of experience. But if you are coming into someplace, like let's take NEI as an example, we are a very small organization of only 100 and something employees, but we do regulatory issues, we do security issues, we do, the full plethora of operating issues. Plus we have legal issues we deal with. I do workforce. When you're going to lead policy in the industry, then you do need to come in with some level of credibility regarding those particular policy issues. So it's very hard for us to hire a lot of entry-level people because everybody at NEI usually works with industry and usually leads certain issues. So that's tough at NEI, but there are entry-level jobs out there. The ones where you kind of want to make a certain amount of money that's at a certain level, those may require a certain amount of experience. So it really just depends. But there's jobs out there for entry-level people, 100%. Okay. I had this question come up at the CRESP dinner as well, which is why I'm actually addressing this. There was someone who I was talking to, and they said, they were asking me questions like, how do you deal with it when you no longer really like your job, or this or that, this or the other? And I said, well, here's the question. Do you not like parts of your job, or do you not like your whole job? And he looked at me. I said, because those are two very different things. I said, there's not a person who is an experienced professional who will tell you, more than likely, I'm going to say this is a very high probability, that there's not anything about a part of their job that they don't like, that they love every single thing that they do. I deal with a lot of paperwork and administration. Do I love doing my paperwork and administration? Heck no. Is that the fun part of my job? Heck no. Am I loving that part of my job? Heck no. But do I love the rest of my job to make it worth my time, energy, and effort to do that administrative stuff? Heck yes. So as we talked about it, he goes, I never really thought about it. I thought I needed to love my job. And I'm like, yes, overall, you want to love your job, but everybody has parts of their jobs that they don't like. That's just going to be the reality. So if you keep chasing a job where you're perfectly happy every minute of every day, you're probably going to be chasing a lot of jobs in your career. That is the nature of it. I think that we have some people on the line who may be professors or that kind of thing. I'm sure doing their administrative paperwork is not the thing that they love doing about their job. They probably love being in the classrooms, talking with people, helping them out, helping them with projects, advising them on their PhD topics, etc. But sitting down and doing a bunch of paperwork is probably not the part of their job that they love. So I'm going to tell you, if your expectation is to love every piece of your job all the time, that's a high, lofty expectation. So you might want to think about that one just a little bit. Next thing I want to talk about, and then we'll wrap this up and I'll answer any questions, is retention. This was a survey done by NAYGN, and they basically said, what are the reasons that you're leaving the nuclear energy industry or have left? And the top, I'm going to say 6 is what we're going to look at. Work-life balance. Now, this varies according to the industry. If you're going to work in a utility with shifts, then this is probably going to be something that is a little bit more of an issue for you, and you're going to have to figure it out. But it's not only that. Sometimes some office jobs are also very demanding, depending on what's going on. For example, if you're with a startup and that startup is very busy, you may be putting in a lot of hours because it is a startup, there's fewer people, and more work is going to fall on your shoulders. So you need to ask yourself, as you're looking for an employer, what type of work-life balance do I need? And is this something that I can deal with on a temporary basis, or is this something that I can't deal with? And you have to ask yourself those kinds of questions. I have put all of these issues in front of the chief nuclear officers in the industry, and they're doing the best that they can to try to help and accommodate these things. But in the end, you need to be aware of these things as you're looking for jobs to make sure you find the right fit for you. Second, pursuit of higher compensation, better benefits. Well, the funny thing about this one is We had a complete split in the survey because some of the people in the survey absolutely positively loved the amount of money they were making, and then we had a whole nother group that were positively hating the amount of money that they were making. So I guess it depends on where you are, how much you're making, what job you do, etc. So this was probably the most divergent set of results that we had. We had people who were extremely happy, and we had people who were very much not happy, and then some people in the middle. Of course, you always have your bell curve. All right, corporate culture, leadership style differences, that's culture. When you're interviewing, make sure that you ask the right questions of the right people. Ask them, what's your favorite thing about working here? What's your least favorite thing? What do you find the most challenging thing to be about working at this organization? What's the thing that you enjoy most about working at this organization? The culture questions. Find the right fit for you, because that's going to be important for your overall engagement and satisfaction and time. Next, this is the one that hurts my heart the most: lack of advancement growth opportunities. When you're someplace small, this one's hard. Employers can still try to add and enrich your jobs and give you additional responsibilities and things like that to try to help you grow your skills. But what I will tell you is an exact story that I heard from one of the respondents who we did a focus group with. And what they said to me was, or to the group was, I was with my company for 3 to 4 years before I realized they had a leadership development program. Well, that hurts my heart, because this person became disengaged because on day one, when we onboarded them, we didn't tell them about the career opportunities that they have. So one of the things I'm out there preaching as I'm talking to different people in the industry is make sure that people are aware of what growth opportunities there are, what kinds of programs, how they can grow their skills, what the career pathways might look like. If you don't know what the career pathways look like as an HR professional at your job, you got to figure that out, because people want those answers, because they want to be able to see a path forward. And this is what I say to a lot of them who kind of say, kind of along the lines of, well, we had to put in our time. Well, the thing is that people are coming out of school, as you all know, with a huge amount of student debt. And they've got to pay that off and still figure out a way to put money aside to buy a house someday, right? That's a huge amount of economic strain. So if somebody offers them more money somewhere, they're probably going to take it because they want to get under from the weight of that burden. So we need to be aware of that as we bring people in, and make sure that they can have those opportunities to grow and earn that additional income as they can. All right, new opportunity outside of my current role that kind of goes with the growth opportunities. And then sometimes it's location. And when I say location, remember that when we're talking about certain employers in the industry, they tend to be remotely located. They tend to be rural in nature and not urban. So sometimes people have long drives, and sometimes that's wearing on them. So you can see the rest of these numbers as you want, but those were the retention issues. So what I'm going to do is I want to spend the rest of my time with you all just answering whatever questions you have. I am your insight into how we think about things in the industry. So please do. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to answer any questions you may have about anything I talked about today.
Lori, this is
Yes.
Michael Greenberg. You can hear me okay?
I can. Hi, Michael.
Yeah, hi. Well, I was at the previous meeting down at Vanderbilt, and I just had a comment, and then I guess that leads to a question.
Sure.
The comment is, I've done some research on this issue over the years, and one of the things I think would be useful to talk about is the difference between salaries and benefits
Yes.
and
Total
community
rewards.
assets. And since you have a lot of people who are from the South and living in the South right now, my own studies show that there's a much lower salaries being paid in the South, not only to construction workers, but nuclear engineers and other people. And then the second question is, since, as you just mentioned, there is this rural issue, and a lot of the sites, especially in the South, are in rural areas 25 to 50 miles away from an
Yes.
urban center. Are you developing, I'll call it a community development program that would help the nuclear industry work with local communities to increase retention? Because the loss is the big issue. You can
Sure.
bring in a lot of people, but if they all leave in 3 years, that's the problem. So I'll
Correct.
stop and
Yeah, no, those are all great points. And what I'm going to say a couple of different things. First of all, where we see the most turnover in the industry is between 0 and 5 years, and the second between 5 and 10. And if you look at what that means in terms of age, that usually tends to be our younger workers. So where we have the greatest level of churn and turnover is our younger workers. So that's one of the reasons I'm focusing so much on retention, is because we need to look at policies. Now, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to highlight these things for our chief nuclear officers and our CEOs so that they can go back and try to put in the right policies, because these aren't things that I can fix at a national level, because these are all things that are determined by company, right? So, but they need to understand the implications. And here's the thing is if you start turning people over, your younger workers in a rural environment, eventually you're going to kind of go through your population. And that's one of the reasons why we're also talking about we have to also look at our non-traditional pipelines as well. And we need to start being better about engaging with different groups. For example, in some areas, if there are some people who are associated with a plant, they have people who have worked there, their relatives and things, they kind of grew up understanding what it is, and they go in and they do very well on their tests. But then they have other people who have never really had access to this kind of thinking and the way things work from looking at it from like a utility perspective, and they go in and they bomb their test. Right. So we need to do better as an industry in terms of understanding wraparound services, in terms of understanding those types of challenges and obstacles that are going to impede our ability to hire. But then also when we get them in, we do need to be careful about our policies and making sure we have the best policies available. Now, having said all that, we do recognize we're in a different type of world now where people tend not to stay. The misunderstanding is that people think that they want to leave, but instead what ends up happening is they end up leaving because they feel like they had a need that was unmet. So my goal is to try to get their needs met, but also I think that we are going to continue to experience higher turnover just because of the nature of the employees that we have now versus those who expected to be in one place for an entire career. We don't have really people who think like that anymore. So it's a very different environment. In terms of working with communities, again, I think that's more on the employers to engage and work with their communities. I can only bring them the data and the information. It's a little bit beyond my scope, but I am trying to educate people as much as possible to try to make sure that they are as engaged in the community as they can be and driving the right understanding of their operations and their jobs. So that's part of what I'm trying to do. Did I answer your questions, Michael?
Yeah, I would just emphasize, and I agree with what you're saying. I think a lot of the individual utilities don't really know how to do this. They may
That's
be
correct.
willing to do something like give a fire engine or add to the police force, but they don't really understand
Yeah.
about helping building up the local education system and so on. So
Yeah. Well,
I think they need a lot of help.
one of the things that we have in place that I'm hoping will help over time is we do have a regional state consortia group, and these represent about 15 different consortia across the nation. And we meet periodically and they talk with each other about things that are working and not working in their
Yeah.
local areas. And I'm hoping that as we convey this information, we're helping each other, whether it's figuring out how to do something better, whether it's sharing successes, whether it's sharing failures. Hopefully we can help continue to share information so that we can try to help each other succeed to the best of our abilities and thrive over time. It's early, but we're working on it. We're working on it. So,
Yep.
anybody else have any questions?
I got one for Mike, but I'll take it offline. I want to know how he adjusted for cost of living. But on Lori, real quick.
I can show you that actually.
Sorry, Mike. No, I'm sure you did. I was just saying, when you live in Aiken, it's a little different than living in San Francisco. For example,
Yep.
when we designed the DOPF, all the people who came from Beckville and San Francisco, you'll see these huge mansions all over Aiken because there were no houses they could buy because they were living in shacks in San Francisco and there were no houses in Aiken they could buy. So I know you get it, Mike. But when I did a presentation, I guess it was last year when I was looking at ECP, as an old guy, if we had more than maybe 2 jobs in a lifetime, that was a lot. And now people are expecting it. Well, people are expecting to have 10, 12 jobs. So how do you deal with on the industry side, keeping people in an organization, they do want to move around. They do want to advance. They want to do these things. But
That's
how do you
exactly
keep
right.
them in an organization when they were expecting to have like 10 jobs over their lifetime?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And those are exactly the types of things that we're trying to deal with these retention policies that we were talking about. It's making sure that they have the career growth, that they have the career pathways, that that they're being appropriately compensated along the way for their developing skills. For example, you all may know about this or may not know about this, but there has been a tradition kind of in our industry of people coming in as radiation protection people, and you have to kind of go through a process. You go junior and then you're kind of senior, and you get a big bump kind of when you get to a more senior level. Well, in the meantime, they're not really utilizing the junior level people the way that they could and should to warrant kind of an increase. So if we increase the level of responsibilities, we can also increase the appropriate compensation and then re-divvy some of these other duties out. So we just have to be more creative in terms of how we're doing things. We also have to think about things like micro credentials to get people in. Let's bring them in, have them do a focused job, then give them another credential, then stack credentials and grow them over time. That's a big concept. We do this very successfully with security people. We turn them into operations people. We need to be creative in how we do that for other people in the organization as well. And we need to be thinking about those different pathways. We need to be very intent about how we're going and looking at that. So it is something that we're looking at under the NEAR at the moment, the Nuclear Energy Academic Roadmap. So hopefully we can come up with some good ideas. Anybody else?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure. I'm sorry. Sorry, JJ.
I'm speaking to myself.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you guys have an inside resource here if you want to know about hiring, things that help you or don't help you. So speak now or forever hold your peace, I guess.
Lori, if anyone comes up with any questions or was not wanting to speak to the group, can they reach out to you and ask you? Okay.
Absolutely. What I will do right now is I will put in the email. I will put my email in the chat, and anybody who wants to reach out to me, they can certainly do so. I'll do my best to give you as honest and clear of an answer as I possibly can. I do know that it is difficult sometimes talking about these sensitive subjects in public. Having said that, I have found that a lot of our younger nuclear people have been amazingly direct with their thoughts lately, which is great. I love the fact that people can feel comfortable in doing that. So last call, anybody for questions?
Lori, you just did too good a job answering all the questions you got while we were sitting at Waste Management.
It was very thorough. It was very thorough.
Well, maybe a little too thorough. Maybe I should have cut it back a little bit and let people have some more time. No? Okay, great. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I really do appreciate it. And again, I'm here offline. If you have any questions that you have for me, feel free. Outside of that, thank you so much for paying attention to all of my slides and to everything I was saying. I know it's a lot for a late afternoon to hear all that stuff. So thank you all.
We are very
Thanks, everybody.
grateful. Thank you very much. It was very, very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Everybody, take care.